In this video, we're going to install the Victron Solar Controller and the lithium battery and start the system up. I think these are all 13 millimeter connections. So the place we start first is the negative. You always remove, this is the coach negative. You can see that this wire is running in behind underneath the battery box, so you know that this is the main coach negative. So that's what we want to undo first. And we are going to be installing a lithium battery, which we don't need to use this magnum temperature sensor with, so that'll just get abandoned in place. And so the negative is gone. Okay, then the next thing I like to do is remove this wire. It's from a negative to a positive, which makes these 6-volt batteries wired in series. And so I like to remove, the negative from that, from this connection. So the main thing that we're doing is we are making the batteries safe. Oh, also remember to turn your coach battery switch to off before you start this. And if you have solar, disconnect your solar, because you want to kill all possible power coming into the coach. But I still treat these battery cables as if they are hot. So this being connected to a positive, it's considered hot, and so you want to make sure that your wrench doesn't touch anything metal while you're removing this, or else you will have a shot, you'll short it, and you definitely don't want to do that. So we remove this cable, and now this battery is safe to be removed. And then the last thing we want to do is disconnect. This is the coach positive, which again, like I said, it's running under the step, so you know that's hooked to the coach. And so you want to disconnect this. It's hot because it's a positive, so you don't want your wrench to touch anything metal. And as I said, I always treat a positive as if it is hot. So I'm putting one of these cable covers over the end, so in case there's any residual voltage or you've not disconnected something, you're not going to have a short and damage anything, blow fuses or anything like that on the coach side. Okay, so now the AGM batteries are disconnected and we can remove them. Okay, so now we are going to change the connections for the solar controller. So this wire right here, this is the positive from the solar panel, and this white wire right here is the negative from the solar panel. So we're going to we're going to get both of these. Free these up. can see this says solar ground. So that's the one we want. Let me put those back on. Alright, and we need to take off, like I said, this is the positive. There's a fuse under here for the solar. So we need to take that off. And right here, I want to show people, this is a mistake. Whoever did this, this is wrong. So if this came from Leisure this way, it's wrong. The largest lug is supposed to be on the bottom. And you can see, when I take this apart, you're going to see that this is tiny. So now you're putting a little tiny gap between the connections. And that makes this very weak. So if you were to pull any kind of high power from it, you can get a voltage drop because of that extra resistance that you're putting in to the connection. It's not a good connection. So since this is a second owner, I'm guessing maybe the previous owner. See how this is? I mean, so this nice big thick lug should have been sitting. This is your power bar right here. This bar supplies power, battery power, to every one of your mega fuses. So you want this lug the flattest on there to make the very best connection possible. So the fact that they put this little teeny thing, so this is acting like kind of like a washer, which adds resistance and heat, which causes voltage drop. Okay, so this will be our lithium battery connection when we put the battery in. Alright, so now we've removed the positive for the solar. And right now these two wires are running to the solar controller, but we're going to remove the solar controller while we're here. Let's make sure all of our cables are tight. Nobody's moving. Okay, so this is the mega fuse block. And each one of these fuses provides something. And if you look over here, it tells you. Like this one on the end. See, this is where the battery cable hooks on, right here. So this very end one, this goes to the inverter. So if I trace down here 150, and it says 150 amps, 150 amps, so this wire, this cable, is going straight to the inverter to power the inverter. So anyway, so that's how you read that. It tells you what connects to what, and the amperage of the fuse. So that's something good to know. Okay. Okay, so as I said before, this is the solar ground, and this is the positive, and both right now, both of these are connected to the solar controller, but we're going to be putting those wires at the solar controller together, and basically that will you know, move or change these connections to be directly solar panel. Now Leisure has a number 8 wire under here tied to this little teeny number 10 wire, which actually reduces the effectiveness of the larger number 8 wire. So we have to cut that off, and then we're going to be splicing new number 8 cable. So this is cable that I have from other solar projects. So I'll try to reuse some of that first. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be splicing on a red back here to that, and then black, which is ground, to this. And we'll be running it through this hole over into the inverter bay. And that's where we're going to mount the new Victron smart solar controller. 100 volt max, 50 amp max output. Okay, and then we've got some circuit breakers to put in. And in this installation, I'm not going to use my solar switch, you know, that I've told people about doing, where you can install a solar switch, you know, at the solar controller. Since I'm doing this, what I'm going to actually do is put a circuit breaker here on the wall for the solar panel power. So whenever anybody comes to do something with the battery, that will be there, and they can immediately disconnect the solar panel power from, you know, feeding in to the coach, you know, 12 volt system. I like the solar switch because it's something easy that inexperienced people can do. But since I'm, you know, doing this myself, then I'm going to do it, you know, in a little bit more advanced way and use circuit breaker instead of a switch. And you know, the advantage of a circuit breaker is, you know, you get some circuit protection as well as be able to use the circuit breaker as an on-off switch. But anyway, so that's why I do that. You don't really need the circuit breaker protection part because all the solar panels are separately fused, so they will take care of themselves as far as protecting, you know, the wiring in the circuit. But I just use the circuit breaker because I can show you. Because it can also easily be used as a switch. This is going to be the 60 amps. It's going to be on the other side, the battery side, but that closes the circuit and that opens the circuit. So you basically can use this as a switch. So you kind of get a twofer. So that's where I'm going to use that. Okay, so since this is so short, I don't have enough room to actually work on it. I'm going to cut this off. Okay, so as I said before, this isn't enough wire for me to work with, so I'm going to cut this fuse holder off. And this is for people who want to know, this is just a fuse holder. So you just take the top off, and you pull the fuse. If you blow it in your current one, which they do blow sometimes, so you have to replace them. And it's a 30 amp for 400 watts and a 15 amp for 200 watts. So anyway, so that's that. We're taking it off. Then I will go under the rig and I'm going to push this through out from the other side, and then I'm going to splice the wire that I need to it, and then I'm going to push it back through, and then we'll be able to start working again. So let me go do that. Alright, so I went under the rig and I butt spliced, you can just barely see it right there, this new 8-gauge wire to the 8-gauge wire that was attached to that little fuse holder I showed you before. Okay, so now I have the red wire connected, and now I have to do the ground. So I'm going to cut this connector off. And score this. And I have to do that with this one. Okay. Gotta get a butt connector. Cut a piece of black heat shrink. I've cut off more wire than I need, so I'm going to cut this back a little bit. And then let's see about this. Cut these just a hair. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to hook this butt connector in. I like to do two, make a good connection. And we're going to put this one in here. Okay. Alright, so now we've got a nice, you can see that's a nice connection. Put this together. Oops. Heat shrink it. And we've got a nice seal connection. Okay, so I have that connected to this spool of wire. Like I said, I'm going to be running it over here into the inverter bay to make the hook up with the solar controller. But in the meantime, let's put back up. Okay, so now what I want to do, this is the Magnum temperature sensor. That's just going to get abandoned in place. I'm just going to shove it in this opening, get it out of the way. I don't care about it anymore. I'm going to put this covering back over this wire. Now, all right, so this is running back through this hole right here. And what we want to do, we want to mount the solar controller, or not the solar controller, the circuit breaker right on the wall here. So let me get set up for that.
Ready?
Further back, I don't want you to... Okay, I've mounted the circuit breaker against the wall, and I put my first connector on so I can connect it, and then I have to do my heat shrink. So I'll do that, but just to show you the crimping, you just put it on. I mean, really, crimping couldn't be easier, especially if you have the right tools, like this multi-gauge crimper that goes from number 2 wire to number 8 wire. I mean, you know, this just really can't be simpler, and a crimp is the most effective connection way to make a connection. So I urge people to really buy the right tools and crimp. It's the best way. Okay, so then I'm going to do my heat shrink. And you just make the connection for the circuit breaker, for a switch, a fuse, whatever you're using. You just put it in between the positive wire, because you're just trying to break the connection of the power wire. And so then I just put each lead on the circuit breaker terminal. This is 11/16. Again, you don't need to drill or tighten it. It just needs to be tight. There. Then you put the little caps on to protect your connection so you don't accidentally do a short circuit. And now this is done. We now have a nice solar panel power switch. Use it like a switch to break the circuit. This means the circuit is tripped, or if it needs to actually trip because it's exceeded the amperage, then it'll work that way. Okay. All right, I'm going to be installing the solar controller here in the inverter bay. So it's going to be like that. You know, out of the way, and then I'll be mounting a circuit breaker over here on the wall next to it for the battery connection. So what I did is I came over to the opposite side and I marked the holes, and I've started drilling them so I can mount it over around on the other side. So I'll come back when I get all that done. Okay, so I run the cable that I had pulled through the battery box to where I'm going to be able to hook this up to the solar controller. So I'm just putting this here for now because this isn't the location, but just so I can get my connections, and then I'll slide it onto the bolts that I have on the wall. So let me get to work on that. Okay, so now we are going to make the connections to the solar controller. So I need to take this off the wire, and take the casing off the wire. Okay. Now the connections that you have to make are already open. So all these holes are open, ready to accept the wire. Now I'm going to tell you, when you have a solar controller mounted someplace and then you're trying to get the stranded wire in that hole, a lot of times the strands stick out. They can stick out of the hole like that. And then you'll have a few extra strands sticking out, which you absolutely do not want that. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a strand. See that wire strand sticking out? It shouldn't be like that. It needs to be smooth. So I'm going to use a ferrule on that because I don't like that the strands are coming out. So I'm just going to redo both of these with ferrules just so I have them correct. And see how you can see how that strand is bent out? You don't want that. You want you want the wires to stay smoothly in. So I am going to use what's called a ferrule. And then you're not going to ever have to worry about that. Okay, so you put the wire there. See how all the wires are in there, and then you have a special crimper for that. And see how it makes a nice clean, and then when you put it in, it goes in perfectly. You don't have to worry about those little strands sticking out like that. Make a nice clean connection. And you don't want those little strands sticking out because they can cross over and touch. Like the grounds could cross over and touch the positive and could cause a short, just could cause basically cause voltage problems, just cause problems. So you want to keep, you don't want any cross strand, I'm going to call it cross strand contamination. So that's why I like these ferrules, because you don't have to worry about that. back up. Alright, so now we put the positive and the negative in here. You don't have to worry anymore about your strands. And tighten them up. There, that makes a much stronger connection. Alright, so that's part one. So now we have the battery. So now we have the battery.
Am I going to be able to get in there to do the reset if that thing pops?
Oh yeah.
Is it underneath?
Oh, no, it'll be fine. I'll show you that. Okay, so now we got the panel. The solar panel connected, and now we've got to make the connections for the battery. So we're going to be using number 6 wire, because the solar controller can put out 50 amps, and 8 gauge wire isn't rated for 50 amps. So the solar panels will put out a max of 18 amps, but at a much higher voltage. Then the solar controller converts that high voltage and lower amperage to low voltage and higher amperage. So you need number 6 wire, which is, you know, the next wire size larger, to carry that larger amperage to the battery for battery charging. So I'll run that to the battery box and we'll come back. Alright, I've pulled the 2 number 6 wires. I'm having to use red wire for both ground and the positive because I didn't have a black wire. So that's fine. So this will go in here to make the negative connection. The battery negative. And then I'm going to also be installing a circuit breaker from the that will be on the battery positive connection, and this will be a circuit breaker used to protect the wiring with circuit protection. So I will need, I'm having to use a short black wire for the positive from that to the positive for the battery. So if you have to use a different color wire, make sure you understand the polarity. Okay, so now basically all my connections are made. So I have the battery ground, and I have what's going to be the positive connection to the circuit breaker. So now I can put the solar controller in the spot that I have planned. So I've already put, you can see the bolts. Can you see the bolts back there? See back on the wall? No, back further. There you go. Okay. So I already have those bolts sticking out, and so I'm going to be putting the slots from the controller on those bolts, because otherwise I would never get them in. Okay. And then I'm going to stick bolts through that I have for that. There's my other one. Oh, here it is. And then through for that. Okay, then I have a washer, lock washer, a nut to go for each one of those. So I will get the solar controller hooked up, and as you can see, there is clearance between the controller and the inverter, so you don't have to worry. See, there's airspace between the blue controller and the black inverter, so there's no touching or vibration or anything. So I'm gonna tighten these bolts and come back. Okay, so now I've got my circuit breaker installed, and I'm making my connections to the battery side of the solar controller. As I said, I'm having to use black for the positive. Fortunately, I think I used yellow. So I will, so this is going to go right here, and then the red one will go on the other side, so I'll make those connections and come back. Alright, so I made my positive connection to the solar controller, and I had to use black wire for the other positive that connects to the inverter, not the inverter, I'm sorry, the solar controller. And I have the red one that I used as ground. I have that clearly marked, so there's no mistakes about that. So all my connections are made, and we're ready to go. Or, this is done. Now I just need to go to the battery box and make the ground make the connections in the battery box, and we'll be ready to wrap up the solar. Okay, so I zip tied some of the wire, so it's all neat and tidy, but also I stuck foam in here to keep these wires pushed back, because when you're closing the door, you don't want this to come in contact with your wire, so you want to make sure you test your closing, that there's no rubbing or scraping against these wires. So that's what I did to keep the wires pushed back to not interfere with the door closer. Alright, so our solar controller installation is done, and we're ready to move to the battery box. Alright, now I'm making my last connections. This is the positive coming from the battery connection of the solar controller. Up here, connected to the right up here on on the battery connection. Wait. Behind it. Okay. And then here's my ground. Red. I'm using a red wire, but I marked it ground. These are 5/16 diameter, because that's what the bolts are here in the battery, the terminals are here in the battery box. And this one is going to go all the way over here on the right side ground bolt. All right. So I can get all these things out of the battery box. And let's tighten these up. So I push this magnum temperature sensor back in here. Get out of my way. I want this battery cable to go up. And you want the these connections to be fanned apart. Alright, so I'll tighten up that ground bolt. And again, you want these fanned apart. Alright, I'll give them one last little tweak. And tighten them up better. And we're done. Okay, so I added some zip ties in a couple of places. I wanted to make sure my connections were all tight, and now that's all buttoned up, and the battery box is prepared and ready to put the batteries back in. So we are done with our battery box solar controller wiring. Alright, now we've already done all the solar panels on the roof. We made those connections. We put the solar controller in down in the inverter bay and made all those connections in the battery box. So now we just need to make the connections between, basically tie together the solar controller wires to finish our wiring. So let me take this down and we'll come back. So I unscrewed the solar controller and I pull it out. So now we're going to make these connections. I don't know if you can see, but these this is the minus and the plus going to the battery, and this is the plus and the minus coming from the solar panel. So if we join the like colors, the ground to ground and the plus to plus, then that makes the connection down to that circuit breaker I added in the battery box for the solar panel power wire, and then I extended those wires on into the inverter bay to attach to the solar panel connections of the new Victron Smart Solar Controller 100-50. So now I just need to disconnect these wires and butt splice them together, so I'll come back when I have that put together. Okay, so first I'm gonna disconnect the negatives. And do I have a knife in here? Alright, so first I will go ahead and join these. I need to strip off. Uh-oh. Alright, stop it, Karen. Okay, can you... Alright, so I need to scoop, take a little bit more. Okay, I'll come back when I have all this wire done. Alright, so I've stripped the two ground wires. And I actually have a step down connector because this is an 8 and this is a 10. You could just use an 8 for both of them, but I like to do things right. So I'm going to butt connect these with the correct step down connector. Alright, I like to do 2 crimps. Nice solid connection. Alright. And heat shrink over it. I'll heat shrink those together at the end. Alright, so now I'll take the positives off. Alright, GoPower disconnected. Okay, I'll get these wires ready and come back. Alright, so I got the solar positive wire put together. Okay. All right. Nice crimping. Okay. Now I'm going to borrow this battery. Alright, so now we have our solar wires joined, which now moves our connection down to the switch, circuit breaker switch I put in there for the solar panel power in the battery box. So now we're done with this. We can push these wires back in here, and I will reinstall GoPower and it'll be abandoned in place. Alright, so that finishes this. So our last thing is we are installing this lithium battery. So now we just push it in. Oh, you have to tilt it to get it under the lip. And that pushes right back, straight back in. Okay. Second, it takes a. All right.
That's already got enough juice in it to do that.
Yep, it's on. No, no, no! Woohoo! Back in biz.
You're a miracle.
Okay, so now we are going to close. Come down here. We're going to close the. Get this in the picture. We're going to close the solar controller, solar panel power. So that's that. And now we're ready to do your Victron Connect. Right there, that's you. And let me call up my settings. Okay, now it's going to go through, say, oh, pair. Oh, you had to have Bluetooth on. So yeah, say pair. Do you have your Bluetooth on? It should turn it on automatically. Okay, now, yeah, you've got to do an update, so hit update.
Appreciate it. Oops, that's not right.
What's it say?
Oh.
Oh, you have to do it twice. Oh, this is actually a little different. Now what's it say? Pin code changed. Oh, okay. All right. All right, so now this is your output. So now we go up here to settings, and we got another update. Understand what, you know, what's what. Continue. All right, hit. Oh, okay, wait a minute. See how now it has a little readout, says 13.5, that's your battery voltage, and whether your solar panels are producing, you're producing, you know, 0 or 1 watt. So now we hit that. Did that light go out?
It's tall.
Okay. Okay, so, like I said, go watch my video, you know, so you see how that, and you're producing 1 watt. Woohoo! So we'll go to the battery settings. Okay, so we want that to be 12 volt, 50 amp, charger enabled. We want to hit user defined, and then we want to hit expert mode. And then we want absorption voltage to be 14.4. And this is for, like I said, this is for the lithionics battery. We want this to be 13.4. Equalization voltage, I just turn that down to 0. Eight volts. Okay, that's good. I just turned it to some low number. I mean, you're not going to use it, but just in case somehow it came on, I don't want it to be anything. Okay, under bulk voltage, we want your rebulk to be 0.1. That's correct. We want this to be fixed absorption. Your absorption duration, we want that to be fixed. Your absorption time, we want that to be, whoa, it's fast. Want it 0 hours. And 30 minutes. We want your tail current to be 10. Okay. 10 amps. What's that? Equalization current percentage. If this will let you go to 0. Okay, good. Automatic equalization disabled. Fixed time, who cares? All the stuff about equalization, I mean, that's all disabled. But like I said, I change it to, like the very minimum settings I can. Just in case something weird happens, like, you accidentally press start now or, whatever. Temperature compensation, it doesn't, oh, they don't let you disable it. Disabled? Okay, so I put in a 0 to disable it. And then low temperature cutoff, you don't need that. It takes care of itself. So now our settings are done. Okay, so right now the panel is producing 23 volts. You probably don't need any, oh, that's the next thing we have to download. I'm guessing the lithionics battery is fully charged. So, okay, so this is your lithionics battery monitor. And like I said, it came from the factory, 99% charged. Oh, we had the little bit of power is being drawn from the battery. So if you go to settings, you don't have to, but you can, set your security pin. If you want to name the battery, you say yes, and then you can put so you can go yes, and instead of my battery, you can put,
Waymore. W-A-Y. Capital M.
oh,
O-R-R.
M-O-R-R?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Howard Waymore.
I always like to do a firmware update. Yes, it's up to date. Now the other good thing about the lithionics battery, as they learn things, or if they want to turn up the power, like I have a 315 battery, they've actually been able to do software changes to turn up the power. So like mine is now it's 320, yours is 320. So as they make advancements, they send out firmware updates. So it's something you want to kind of do periodically to keep your battery up to date with what lithionics is learning and changing and redesigning about their batteries. Okay, so now your battery is named Waymore. So if you go back to the list, you'll see your name is there. So you call this up because this is the most accurate battery information that you have, that you need. And so this tells you your state of charge. It tells you what the battery voltage is. If right now we're using 1 amp, so red, and this is a net. So it's how much amps are coming in and how much amps are going out. It's the net of in and out. So right now this says you're using 1 amp.
And I wonder what that would be.
Oh, just when you turn on, you know, the coach, just connecting, you know, so the lighting up the leveler panel, you know, the leveling panels.
We haven't turned the switch on in there.
The coach, but yeah, but those are all directly connected to the battery. Remember, the inverter's directly connected to the battery, the levelers,
That's right.
the chassis battery charger, you know, all those, the generator, all that stuff is direct connected, as well as the coach battery switch. That's just one of,
Okay.
you know, those 5 mega fuses I showed you under the battery box.
That's right.
Okay, and then one of the other cool things, time remaining. So if you're out camping and you're using your rig and you're using, you know, a kind of a set amount of current as you're camping, you can look here and it will tell you the time you have left before the battery runs down to its 10% never die first cutoff. That's its first cutoff. So what it does is that if you run it down to the 10%, it's still like at 12.8 volts, which is, you know, basically a fully charged lead acid battery. So, you when you turn it back on, you know, you want to have in your mind, I got to get this battery charged because you used it down. So you can turn it back on, and you can use it to start your generator. You can, you know, pull in the slide, like if you're going to drive instead to charge your battery, you can pull in your slide, you know, break camp, turn the key, start driving, and your DC to DC charger, when you guys get one installed. Right now you have an isolator solenoid. So anyway, so some battery charging will occur when you turn the key, or like I said, if you want to start the generator to charge the battery through the inverter battery charger, plenty of juice to start the battery. So you have that last 10% to do what you need to do to start getting the battery charged, because that's the priority.
Without having the sun to do it.
Yeah, well, if you were, yeah, because
Yeah,
already,
if it's
presumably,
already- yeah,
if you could use sun, you were already
still
using
recharging.
sun. But, you know, that's in the
Just in
mix
case.
of you running it down, you know. And you have 600 watts, so if you were parked in full sun, you know, perfect conditions, 600 watts will produce, you know, 42, you know, good, definitely good 42 amps per hour. So that's a lot of battery charge. I mean, that's a good number. So, but if you're using it, you know, so, you know, you have to say to yourself, I either need to, you know, dial back using my power because I don't want to hit my 10% never die cutoff. Because if you do, what happens is it completely turns off. So then you have to consciously turn it on. And they do that. Lithionics does that because they want you to be thinking, you know, I got to get this battery charged. You know, because you'll damage a lithium, any battery really, if it just sits, you know, at a low power. So anyway, so that's a conscious thing that they want you to do. You know, turn that battery back on and get it charging
And
again.
that's watching this. So if it were getting down to 15%,
Oh, yeah.
probably want to
It would
start
be that.
thinking about
Yeah.
what.
Yeah, I never let
Prevent it.
mine run down. I mean, I maybe let it run down to 20, you know, because I just don't want to, you know, get right to the edge. I want to figure out what are we going to do to start getting the battery charged. Anyway, okay, so that's it. We're done. Okay, so right now the solar panels aren't producing enough voltage really, you know, to charge a lot, but oh yeah, it just kicked in. So the critical thing though is the battery is what determines how much solar is going to be produced. If the battery doesn't need charging, then no watts are produced by the solar. So, you know, a lot of
They're
people,
put like in an idle state.
yeah, so a lot of people are like, my solar's not working, it's zero. Well, is your battery full? Well, yeah, okay, that's why it's zero.
Don't have to worry.
Yeah, so, you know, the battery is the one that determines when I need charging. So, you know, the solar is out there ready to charge it. If you're plugged into shore power, the inverter battery charger is, you know, I'm ready to charge that battery. So as soon as the battery starts getting used down and it says, hey, I need some charging, then these things will kick in, your inverter battery charger, the solar, and you'll see the watts go up to supply what the battery needs. So even if it needs charging, your solar panels could put out 42 amps, but you've only drawn it down, 10 or 15%. It's not going to demand 42 amps. It's just going to demand,
Just enough to
6,
get it.
10, 12, whatever it needs. So that's the key, is the battery is what determines how much solar charging, production happens and it takes, and the same with the inverter battery charger. And the same with if you have a DC to DC charger under the passenger seat. We talked about that. The same with the DC to DC charger. The battery tells it what it needs. But you guys have an isolator solenoid right now, so that basically is, a not very sophisticated thing, and all it does is join the battery. So it just joins the chassis battery to the lithionics battery. And, like I said before, you want to replace that with a DC to DC charger because there's no throttling. That battery can suck 150 amps, which you don't want that from your alternator. It'll burn it up. So you want to put that DC to DC charger in there because it's a limiter.
It moderates it to where it keeps it stable.
Right, and so it even though the lithium battery might be drawn down a lot and it wants to pull, a lot of amps, it will limit it and say, no, you can only have, 50, 30, 50, 60, whatever you pick. Your coach is a 2018, so Mercedes really only, says like 40 or 50, so, 50 would be the max that I would go. But anyway, so that's your next project.
A question: if we're going down the road and it's bright sun, so we've got the benefit of solar, but we're also have the engine running, we're rolling. Which
It's
takes-
all together.
So it's still going to be drawn off the chassis battery, even though you've got ample solar.
Well, if you have ample solar, it probably won't take that much from the alternator.
Okay.
But, if, let's say you drew it down like 100 amps and the solar could put out 42 and, it would try to take, that 50 plus from the alternator. So it's going to take, it's going to take from all the sources as much as it needs, as much as it wants to take, because it can, it can suck it. Okay, so, all right. I think that's a good tutorial. We're done.